From Square 2, this is What's Wrong with Revenue. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO at Square 2, and along with my longtime friend Eric Kalis and co-founder at Square 2 and six-time entrepreneur, Eric and I will answer the questions CEOs have every single day. What's wrong with revenue? You can be part of the live cast show where we'll answer your questions every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, or catch the show on demand on YouTube and on all your favorite podcast networks. Also, check out all our audio and video content on Square 2 Plus at the square2marketing.com website. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to What's Wrong with Revenue. This is I believe this is episode 53. Is that right? Yeah, episode 53. My traditional co-host, Eric Kalis, business partner and buddy, is also still on the road. So we're joined by Bob McCarthy, content lead here at Square 2. Bob, I appreciate you stepping in. This is starting to become a regular thing for you now.
I was just going to say, people are starting to talk, Mike. Word around the water cooler is that you might like me, so you better be careful.
Eric might have to look for a new gig. He might be pushed to the side.
Wally pipped.
That's right. Right. Awesome. So today we're going to talk about events and trade shows and conferences. You know, the pandemic at least appears to be, for the time being, somewhat over. And people are certainly back at conferences and events and shows. So I thought we would talk about that a little bit in terms of how to optimize everybody's participation in that. But before we get started, let me do a little housekeeping. Remind everybody that the show is available on the Square 2 Marketing YouTube channel. You can like us, you can subscribe, you can comment right there. Go to the square2marketing.com channel. All the episodes of What's Wrong with Revenue are housed there for your viewing pleasure. You can also get the show on Square 2's free streaming service, Square 2 Plus, www.com, Square2Marketing, www.square2marketing.com/Square2Plus. We have all of our audio and video content in a Netflix style platform where you can subscribe to the service. You can get all kinds of audio and video content for CEOs, CROs, CMOs. We have a HubSpot section for technology and HubSpot related audio and video content. Go check it out. I'm sure you'll love it. You can also get the show at the bottom of our website. There's a link, What's Wrong with Revenue. Go check it out. All the shows are posted there. You can then also ask us questions, which we'll do a couple of questions today. As well, you can subscribe to the show specifically, and we will email you the show the next day if you can't join us at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Bob, thanks again for stepping in for Eric. Like I said, we're going to talk about trade shows, conferences, and events today. They're all back, and they may not be back in full, blown condition pre-pandemic, but they're back nonetheless. Everybody know we went to a pretty big show earlier in September. But do people really know how to optimize their participation in these events? I find the answer is generally no, that they pretty much just show up and hope people stumble into their area and they can have a productive conversation. And that's really not the best way to optimize your investment, to generate leads, to drive more sales opportunities, and to close new customers. So we're going to talk about a variety of event-related tactics that'll help you improve your ROI, leverage your investment associated with conferences and trade shows. We're going to talk about some tricks and techniques that we typically use with clients to attract the right people, to repel the wrong people. And also, we're going to talk about how to optimize your follow-up so that what we say, no lead gets left behind post-show. A lot of people come to these shows, they get back to the office, they're inundated trying to catch up, and they literally forget to follow up on the leads and the people they talk to at the show. Specifically, we'll cover how to create an event plan before you leave for the show so that you make sure that everyone understands the plan and how to get full value for your participation. We're going to talk a little bit about why less leads, but more qualified leads might actually be better. It's not just about collecting a business card. This should be about collecting a business card of someone who is interested in the services and products you provide, someone who has pain, someone who has power, someone is a good fit for the services, products and services, solutions you provide. So it might not be about numbers. It might be about quality. Talk about that a little bit. We're also going to talk a little bit about how your marketing automation platform will play a significant role in collecting that information and making it easy. And then we'll talk about why you might want to consider speaking at these events besides just exhibiting. Yes, that's a little more putting yourself out there, but it really provides a multiplier effect for your participation in the show. And then we'll also talk a little bit about some in-show promotions that work to generate good sales opportunities also. So I know it's a lot. We got an hour. Bob actually has some expertise with these kinds of events and really building them out to the point where they're a little better than just, table and pop-up banner. So we'll try to cover all of that as we get into it. So Bob, tend to kind of like set the bar high, but give me a little thought in terms of where you are, in terms of people getting back to these events and what might be going on in terms of people's participation and how we can really help our audience leverage the events and shows that they're going to be doing over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think in working with clients who are going back to trade shows and having been to events myself, it's not that different with the changes going on in the rest of the world. Like during pandemic, there was some great things that happened in a very bad period of time in terms of like experience, which we've talked about a lot, just how easy and seamless things are because people started putting up, creating apps and being able to handle things on demand. And when we started going back to trade shows, most people, 99% of people, like forgot that. Like, hey, I love this great seamless experience. And they just went back to like the table, the booth, staring at you in my golf shirt. Here's a pen, here's a koozie, like whatever the hell it is. And it's like we forgot everything that we loved that had been good in the year prior. And so I think in working with clients recently, together collaboratively, we've been trying to bring some of that, like, okay, what does a great experience look like now in a trade show? Like, what have we learned that we can bring into an event? And
Such a good
a
point.
lot more.
You got any examples of some of the things you might have been talking
Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Yeah. So we worked one of our clients, Crosby Hops, and this was. So they're a hop provider, a grower. They provide hops for brewers across the country. We've probably discussed them before. I work closely with them, but their first event back after the pandemic was something called CBC, the Craft Brewers Conference. It's their biggest event. Every brewer is there, and it's typically how they do a lot of glad handing, get orders for the year, and that had been canceled in 2020. And so they came back in 2021 and 2022 and said, it's got to be different. We have to be different. And their mandate to us was I thought pretty cool. They said, not so much worried about the leads. We know we can give away a bunch of stuff and people will just give us their email address. What we really want, because there's booths everywhere and people are pouring beer everywhere, is we want to put together an experience that when people leave CBC, they remember us and they're talking about us. Wow, wasn't that cool? Wasn't that different? And so what we came up with were taking that booth experience and creating a digital experience, a lot of what we call digital activation. So, and also trying to make it a bit more immersive, like have it feel like you were at the hop farm, which people were not doing at the time because travel was still a little iffy. So what's that entail? They had a big screen behind them instead of the banner that had a drone footage of flying through the hop fields. They had sensory stations out with fresh hop that you could go up and smell, which is a big thing brewers do, to smell the crop. That's all well and good, nothing too hard there. That usual experience of standing at a table and, if it's a popular table, 5 people deep, waiting to get through to maybe talk to someone or get that koozie or that hat, whatever you want. We decided to do away with it. That sucks. We all agreed. And so if you are waiting in line, and they happen to be pouring beer too, so they knew people would be waiting to drink beer. We set up, they had stations with, signs. And on the signs, there were QR codes where, you could do a QR code, and we had developed for them a mobile landing page that looked just like an app, where you could read tons and tons of content that we had created for them. You could also enter your giveaway. They were giving away a skateboard. You could set up a time to meet with somebody. All this stuff without having to actually speak to someone, you could do on your own while you waited. When you got to your table where you could do the hop sensor, you could taste beer, there was a flip menu like at a restaurant where with all kinds of promotions and things going on, again, more QR codes. And on the landing pages, they were all hooked up to HubSpot. So everything was getting collected at the time, but it was all sort of feeding into this one experience. And yes, they had physical books that we had written for them laying down that, and everything got grabbed up. But, you know, it was kind of, there's this blurring of channels. It used to be like your event was physical and then here's your digital. And like, this is trying to really bridge the gap between the two. And ultimately they had their best event ever. They collected something like 500, 600 leads at this one event, from really having all these activations. Nobody felt like they were put out waiting in line and not being attended to. They could self-serve. They could have the experience that they wanted. And from that, that's more and more of when I have conversations with clients about like ideas, trying to push that, like, let's blur the lines between digital and physical and give an experience that is memorable and serves your brand.
Yeah, that's really such a great example of what you can potentially do if you think a little bit out of the box, and if you think a little about these two kinds of experiences and bring them together. Um, that does take a little bit of planning. And,
A
one of the
lot, yeah.
things I think a lot of people fail to do is really show up with a plan, right? They kind of have their booth, and maybe they ordered some stuff and they have a couple people who are planning on manning it, and that's generally all you're going to get out of a traditional kind of, I would say, trade
Hmm.
show or small conference type of participation. And I think uh, if companies put a little more time into the planning piece of it, they're going to get a lot more out of it. For instance, like, do you literally, like, one of the things we encourage people to do, especially when it's a multi-day show, is, what kind of uh, lead gen do you want to get out of this, right? Like, let's just say they want 200 leads, right? And you're going to have 3 slots where the stage is open. Look at the hours it's going to be open, and literally set some goals for the team for each of those slots in terms of how many leads they actually need to get you to your goal. So instead of kind of like leaving it to chance and evaluating at the end of the show, there's some steps along the way that everyone can kind of be a little more proactive about trying to get to the goals associated with your participation in the show, right? Um, you know, Lots of times you see people at shows, they're kind of like hanging back, they're in the booth, they're not really engaging the people who are
Hmm.
walking by. Like, again, like, get out into the alley, what into the like crosswalk, not in your booth. Get out and about and like bring people in, like talk to people. Like, look, I'm an introvert. It's not normal behavior for me to participate in that way, but if you're sending me to the show and we're investing money in the event and we have some business objectives associated with the show, everyone kind of has to understand that might have to work a little bit out of their comfort zone, and get a little more involved in talking to people. Not saying everybody's going to be a good opportunity or everybody's going to be a good lead, but if you talk to 50 people instead of 10, you're probably going to find more opportunities buried in those 50 people than if you're just kind of waiting for people to stroll into
Yeah.
your area.
As, as you said it, I was already thinking it when you said you were a bit of introvert, and I was thinking, believe it or not, we're both somewhat introverted. And uh, what I find kind of antithetical about some of these approaches to events and trade shows are that people do hang back. And really, I think at a minimum, what you should be trying to do is give people a sense of like what it's like to work with you. Now, when someone works with Square 2, they're absolutely going to meet you, and there's a 75% chance that they're going to meet me, depending on if they're just doing some smaller project that doesn't include content, they may not meet me, but there's a really good chance. So you want people like us out in front, chatting, giving them an idea of like what it's like to deal with us, our shining personalities. But you want to, I always, when going back to the example of Crosby, them saying, I want them to leave having experience like that. That is it's that one of those first impression, type moments you get with this might be the first interaction I have with your brand if I'm walking the floor. And yes, there's whatever the aesthetics are of your booth, but it's also who I'm interacting with and how engaging that and how interesting it is and how knowledgeable they feel. Because that leaves an impression on me too as I walk away and I'm thinking about like, well, is this possibly somebody I might work with down the line?
Yeah, and I think that also gets back to some of the planning, right? You can't
Yeah.
really just plan to bring some literature and stand in front of a table, right? Like you really do have to do more like what you're talking about, like we did for Crosby, but you do have to really stretch in terms of creating that experience in that area, right? You
Hmm.
have to, you know, make it multi-sensory, right? Like I've done some shows where we baked cookies live right there, right? And what did that do? Like the entire place was filled with the smell of fresh cookies baking, right? People came over. What are you guys doing over here? Like, can I get a cookie? Well, yeah, maybe. Like, let's talk a little bit about what you do and let's see if we can help you. And obviously, everybody gets a cookie, but you have to start looking at it like that. I did one event a long time ago where we had uh, a clear safe, like a clear plexiglass safe with a combination, and there was $10,000 in the safe. And in order to try your hand at the combination to see if you would win, you had to be a qualified sales lead for the company that I was working for at the time. So obviously, a clear safe with $10,000 in cash attracted a lot of attention. There was a long line of people who wanted their opportunity to try to crack the code and get in there. Again, not everybody was able to do it, but the people we really wanted to talk to, after we qualified them a little bit, got a little, a little like key or card, and they were able to try to do it. So, you want to generate some buzz. You want to kind of make it multi-dimensional. You want to make it active, like, some of what you described for Crosby too. That takes some planning, and it takes some
Yeah.
thinking, and it takes some creativity to come up with that experience, right? If you're creating that experience and people are going to talk about it at the show, more people are going to come by. If it's no experience, no one's going to talk about it. You may stumble upon the handful of people who actually knew you or came to see you there, which is fine. But generally, your objectives at these shows is to introduce yourself to people who don't know you, collect contact information for people that could potentially use your products or services, talk to prospects who actually need and want your products and services, and then obviously connect with customers also, while you're there as well. So
It's, yeah. I was just going to say that, events are their own little microcosm, their own little universe. And, when you do put together something that is well thought out, and yes, it does take planning, word gets around very quickly. They're like, what did you hear about that? And like, I mean, we've both been at shows, and it's like when you have your break to go and check around, like, the one you're supposed to go check
yeah,
out, because word
right,
gets
right,
around very quickly if you
right,
do it right and you do it well.
right. Which actually brings me to a really important point where I mentioned earlier, it's not always about the number of leads. Sometimes it's about the quality of leads. I don't know that collecting 1,000 business cards at a show is necessarily going to help you if 999 of them are just not the right kind of people, not people you want to do business with. And this gets me to one of my pet peeves. One of my pet peeves with conferences and events like this is the swag that people give away, right?
Yeah.
They invest a decent amount of money for t-shirts and hats and what do you call it, thumb drives and all these kinds of things that they're happy to dole out to whoever's walking by. And sometimes you see the people with the bags and they're just collecting something from everybody to bring home to their kids. And I don't think that's something you want to do, right? We actually had a client a long time ago. They were in the radio antenna maintenance business, right? Those giant antennas with the big
Hmm.
flashing red light on it. They climbed up and took care of that for their clients, the radio stations. And, we said to them, who they've been to a lot of shows, it was a trade show heavy circuit. We said, look, you've been giving away all this swag and you're not getting anything out of these shows. Why don't we do a live like tower assessment, right? Like sit down with the tower engineers and talk to them about their tower and give them a safety assessment, give them an operations assessment, give them a maintenance assessment, like give them something of value for the tower that they're tasked with making. Look, if that tower goes down, the radio station's off the air. So their job is very clear. Keep it running correctly. Offer them some insight into some things they might be thinking about. Originally, we're like, well, who's going to sit down and do that with us? And we're like, well, honestly, people that have issues are going to sit down and do that with you. The people that are worried about it, the people that maybe are looking for a new provider are going to do it with you. So you may not walk away with 50 leads. You may walk away with 5 really good sales opportunities because those people took the time to sit down with you and talk about their particular issues. So I want to highly recommend to the people that are listening to us or watching us that I'm not against giving stuff away, but I'm against giving stuff away to attract people for the sake of giving stuff away. I almost would rather you not buy the swag or hold the swag back for people that are taking advantage of your expertise, right? And these assessments, these like free consultations, like, and obviously, Bob, you're the content guy. You probably could come up with a different label for it, but these opportunities to sit down with experts and talk about the participants' specific business brings a lot of value to those people. And then if you want to give them something because they spent some time with you and you got to know them a little bit, I'm all for it. But I just can't stand it when people are like, what do you got? Oh yeah, I'll take one. And okay, can I scan your card? Sure. Okay, great. Now we've really just wasted everybody's time with that exercise. And I gave something to someone that is never going to ever hire us.
I think, like a lot of matters at Square Two, the two sides that you and I are talking about end up working really well together. Because if you do what you said and you really create an offer, an experience that is going to be attractive to who your best prospects are, your high intent prospects, and at the same time you offer them something memorable, you're really combining this idea of demand generation and also really targeted lead generation, because you might have a conversation with them there, perhaps you do some sort of evaluation or consultation, but chances are they're not really going to sign on the dotted line there. But if it's a great experience, if everything about their interaction with you was wonderful, there's a good chance that they're going to remember you when they leave, and then they may end up coming back in through your website or calling you. And like you said, I'm guilty of collecting swag, or at least the first time I went to Inbound, I think I went swag crazy for like 2 hours, and then I started to feel a little shameful, and then it was more like, okay, I'm going to go to the people that like maybe I would actually have an interest in their stuff, because it's just foot traffic. It's empty calories.
It is. And this does get back to the plan too, because if you come up with a really good experience, you should be planning on almost like pre-marketing that opportunity in advance of the show, right? So if you're sponsoring these events, you typically get access to the registration list, which almost always comes with email addresses. I would highly encourage you to send some pre-event emails out, kind of talking about what you're doing, why they should be coming over, who should be coming over, how to find you. Sometimes even if people have the best intent to stop by a particular booth, they're easily distracted. There's a lot going on at these events. They're distracted by other exhibitors. They're distracted by friends. They're distracted by colleagues. They're distracted by pulls out of the exhibit hall to go out to drinks, go out to dinner, go to other sessions. So, you're fighting an uphill battle when you're participating in these in terms of getting people to come by your booth and see you, which is why I'm just not a fan of the randomness that most people approach these opportunities with. Like, oh, I'm here. Anyone who's potentially interested in what I do will find me because I happen to be at booth 22, right? Like, it's not happening. Like, you have to be much more proactive in informing them what you're doing and inviting them to come in. You have to provide a much better experience that people talk about if you're going to get any kind of return from your investment in this. I see way too many people participating in these shows, and then at the end of the show, they're like, well, what did we get out of this? And a lot of times it's like, I don't know, not much. Do we want to do it again? I don't know. Well, like, and then you're just kind of stuck in this no man's land where, you spend a lot of money, you're not sure you got anything out of it. You don't know what to do about next time. Like, you kind of feel like maybe we shouldn't do it, but you're not sure. Like, nothing positive came out of this, as opposed to going into it with a plan, creating a great experience, knowing how many good sales opportunities you generated, and be able to say at the end, like, yeah, we want to do this again because we got this out of it.
I don't know if this, qualifies as a curveball or not. So I won't pose it to you as a question, which I was going to, but I'll just introduce the conversation I had this week with another client. Um, I don't want to mislead people into thinking like this is only valuable information for like if you have a table or a booth. I actually think that this is the way you need to be thinking, even if you're just attending. You're going as a team and you're going to the big, event for your industry, but you're not necessarily, showcasing anything, or you don't have space. I sent through some content for a client this week, and she said, "Great, looks nice. What the hell am I supposed to do with this?" Like, just didn't know what to do with it. I was like, "Oh, really? Well, here's 5 things I would do with it." And one of them was, I know you're going to an event, and I know you're gonna be handing out business cards. Ace your business cards, put a QR code on it, take it to a landing page. This would be one part of it. Curate some content, give them an experience. So now somebody, instead of just having 1 of 7 business cards, has a little, experience that is somewhat memorable, and they'll learn more about you than just, oh, you're so and so from such and such company. And I mean, that's an easy thing, but thinking about
They
when you're
liked it.
going and
Did they like that
planning it
idea?
out. Oh, she was like, "That's amazing." I
Yeah.
like because she just been handing out
Yeah.
a business card or carrying around like printouts of like materials like trifolds, like, here, take this. It's just like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no, just do this
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And she thought it was an amazing idea, and she's gonna go through with it. But I didn't know. I don't know if you'd shared it, with Inbound, your recent trip to Inbound. We'd take a slightly different approach too, instead of doing a table, being attendee. So I didn't know if you'd already shared that, but that's
No, we didn't.
also.
We probably didn't talk much about that, but that is an interesting kind of take on participation in these events. So Bob's talking about Inbound, which we had real 2 shows dedicated to it, but a handful of us attended. It's kind of our big kind of technology show for the marketing space. And between us friends, the sponsorship at Inbound is relatively expensive. So we wanted to try to crack that nut a different way. So we held an educational session that was kind of near the conference, close enough that people were not put out to get there. Literally had to walk across like a lawn to get there. And we promoted it heavily before the show and generated a decent registration list. And then we promoted it in show with these little business cards with a QR code on that basically said the secret to revenue generation is across the street. Scan this card to find out more. And when they went to that landing page, they obviously found out more about, we were having the best of Boston beer tasting, and had a couple people talking about helping them with their specific marketing automation and revenue generation issues. We had kind of a panel of people who were over there to handle different aspects of challenges people were facing, and it worked out really well. And we ended up with 2 good opportunities out of it. Now, again, like, that might seem pedestrian to a lot of you, but we hardly spent any money on this. I mean, I think we spent like $1,000 all in, and we got 2 opportunities. Opportunities for us are usually in the $100,000 range. So, if one of those closed, it's a home run, by all measurement standards. So, you have to try to think a little bit out of the box, to Bob's point. And I think business cards are a little passe to begin with. I mean, who's handing out business cards anyway? But if you had something with a QR code that can send people back to your website in a very specific page, specific to that event, you are giving them a good opportunity to engage with other content you might have. I mean, you literally could have an entire pillar page of things that they could connect with, watch, read, listen to, that would give them a really amazing immersive content experience and differentiate your company and potentially drive a significant amount of leads without you having to buy a sponsorship or an exhibitor package or any of those kind of traditional participation methods.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. It's like you there. I don't know that, like when we started talking about this show and the what we wanted to discuss. it occurred to me like, well, I don't know if I have answers. I don't like solid answers. The one answer I do know is like you just gotta think differently and think creatively. And everybody's doing a lot of the same thing. And like you need to zag. Everyone's zigging, you gotta zag because it's just what people are expecting more. One, it'll help you stand out, obviously, to just be doing something a little bit differently. But like I said at the top, the experience that people have been getting in every other facet of their life, that's not separate from what they're expecting when they go to, a showroom. They still want like a great experience that doesn't feel, something from 3 years ago right now feels like it's from 25 years ago. So
It does. And I have kind of this reputation for talking to event planners and asking for things that are not on the list of sponsorships. Like
you do. Yeah.
I've asked a number of times if I could pilot a small blimp, like a remote control blimp around the exhibit floor area and just drop these little coupons down or whatever, little like cards or something like that. And I've been shot down every time, but I'm going to continue to ask. I guess today maybe it would be like, well, can I have a drone kind of circling the area and
Do you think
maybe
you should have lived in the 20s? Like you sound like one of those, like, the old song and dance man outside.
yeah, like Barnum and Bailey, right?
Yeah, right,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
My point is like sometimes what's on the sponsorship docket isn't enough. It's not creative enough, and I'm encouraging people to try, think out of the box, and ask for things. You never know. Like I guess maybe it's a safety issue, but you might find someone who's like, oh, that's such a cool idea. Like, yeah, you could do that. Like, okay, great. Like I'm renting the lamp, I'm putting my signage on it, I'm figuring out what it's going to drop, I'm flying it around. Everyone's pointing at it like, oh, what is that? Like it's a home run if you can get someone to do it, and you never know who's going to say yes. So, I'm encouraging you to think out of the box, create your own sponsorships, create the kinds of experiences that are going to get people's attention. It might not be something that is, a standard package for this particular event. I want to talk a little bit about like automating some of this experience because this is a big issue for a lot of people that do these kinds of things. If you come home with 300 business cards, what are you supposed to do with those business cards? Like who takes those and sits down in front of the computer and puts them in your CRM so you can run your follow-up? And by the way, that's exactly what you should be doing. So I know a lot of places now you scan people's cards. It gets in their badges. It gets into a Excel spreadsheet that you end up with after the show. Okay, you still have to get that Excel spreadsheet into something so you can run your follow up. You can't just work on it one row at a time. So I'm encouraging people to also think about how to automate this process. Now, QR codes are a great way to do it. You can have people take out their phones. Everybody has a phone. You can have them click on this QR code. You can get them to a landing page. You can have them fill it out. And now immediately that information is in your CRM. It's in your marketing automation platform. All kinds of amazing post-show and in-show experiences can trigger off of that. You can have in-show promotions that run. You can have post-show follow-up that run. You can have lead nurturing that kind of shares additional educational information based on who they are and what their title is or what they talk to you about at the event. There's so many really personal ways in which you can continue the experience after they talk to you at these events. And I think everyone really ought to be considering how to leverage marketing automation in conjunction with their more traditional event strategy to produce this kind of experience. Again, it's going to take some planning. It's going to take a little creativity and forethought, but the tools are there to deliver a much better experience than talking to a sales rep for 15 minutes and then not hearing from that rep for maybe 2 weeks until they get back to the office, dig out from the stuff they didn't do while they were at the show, and then finally get around to their follow-ups. That is incredibly unremarkable. And if I was actually a hot prospect and interested, I probably would be annoyed that it took you so long to get back to me. So I'm highly encouraging people to think out that part of the process too, and use technology to make it easy.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I think you're right. The one of the great benefits of that using the QR code with the Crosby example was that they were going right into HubSpot, whether you signed up for the giveaway or there was an offer like, hey, here's all this content. You're probably not gonna be able to read it right now. How would you like it sent to you? So some people just sent their email address in. But because it all went in, pretty much 2 days after they got back from the conference, it was nurture emails going out of, kind of what you said. It's everyone's busy. Like if you're in your own little world at the show, and you probably have this this idea that, like, well, of course everyone's going to remember me, but they went to however many dozens of other tables, and you hope you stand out, but you don't know. A lot of people had interactions with them. So if you're able to very quickly get back, say, hey, with Crosby, they were launching a brand new product. So just, again, try to get it top of mind. And everything going on, just wanted to remind you, we've got this brand new product that's going out, some exclusive hop varieties. They're going to be on sale starting such and such day. Get on up early so you can kind of very quickly, as people are coming back, get top of mind again, and refresh their memory about conversation they had, or things that um, perhaps they had been interested in but never went back to look at again.
I've heard this lots of times, like I spoke to this prospect at the show and they were really interested, and I don't know now I can't get in touch with them, right? Well, what do you think happened? They talked to someone else who they were more interested in, right? So you can't assume that just because you had a good conversation with a prospect, you're good to go, especially at a show or conference where most of your competitors, or at least some of your competitors, are there,
Mhm.
and everyone's saying something slightly different. It's very easy for a prospect, back to the cyclonic journey, buyer journey, to get spun out of one stage of their journey and into another stage because of something someone said to them while they were walking around. And it could be casual, it could be at the bar, it could be at dinner. It doesn't have to necessarily be in a formal, like, booth and prospect setting, but that makes the ongoing communication that much more important when there are all those inputs and all of that chaos and all of that content being thrown at these people. Whoever wins is the one that's going to create the best experience, and that experience
Mhm.
can't end when they walk away from you on day one. It has to continue.
I think that's the great case also for the, again, you don't have to ditch the swag, but don't rely on the swag.
Yeah,
50 tables are giving out swag, you're one of 50 giving out some sort of tchotchke.
right. And if you're counting on that swag to attract people to your booth or to differentiate you in any way, you can forget it, because
Yeah.
no matter how cool you are, someone's going to have something at least as cool. Maybe it won't be cooler, but someone else is going to come up with something that's actually pretty
Yeah.
cool also.
And just to go back to, not to lean on it too much, but that, it said it was the experience that Crosby was leaning on. Their giveaways, like, you did not automatically get it. Like, they did almost like a drawing of, like, I think they had a skateboard a day they gave. So you had a chance to win a skateboard, and they gave away like 40 pounds of hops, like, once a day. So again, in part it's because no serious customer is coming up to you and just being like, I'm interested in your hops, but can I have a skateboard? And you're just like, you're not serious. Like, you are not a serious prospect if you're
Right.
coming up and, like, that's your demand. It's like, you're not going to lose customers by not giving away a hat.
Yeah, I don't like giving away things that are not directly related to the service. Like, I don't like, oh, come up and win a free iPad, right? Or, put the golf ball in the hole and you win an iPad, or you win a flat screen TV, or you win a trip to the Bahamas. Like, I'm not trying to attract people who like TVs and iPads and trips to the Bahamas. I'm trying to attract people who have issues with their companies and growing it, who have issues with their marketing, have issues with their sales, have issues with their technology. I have to offer them something that is related to that, right? And if they're not interested, they're not a good prospect for us, right? Like, um, I wasn't at the Crosby show, so I don't know exactly how the skateboard fit in there. But if it's a step two towards, like, well, if you're interested in hops, obviously you're a brewer, right? So, like, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And by the way, if you're interested in hops, you can win the skateboard. Like,
Yeah.
I'm good with that. But if all I'm doing is raffling off a skateboard every day and there's no other gates to get through, then all I'm attracting are people who like to skateboard.
Yeah, no. I mean, they're all brewers going to that, fortunately. But I think my larger point is, it's a branding thing for them. It's which not a big deal. One a day versus everybody gets a hat or everybody gets something like that. You're cutting down on the amount of just
You
people.
are.
I'm here
Yeah,
to
and those
get
people just
something
walking around looking for free stuff,
for
you're
free
not
stuff.
joking.
It's
I
not
mean,
there. Yeah.
right, right, yeah.
It also, going back to the example of, what you did this year at Inbound, it's like, yes, you gave away something, people came and they could sample some beer and they got a little cute little tasting glass, which is cool. But ultimately, at the end of the day, and I love beer, I love beer. Like, am I coming to have a conversation with you and Kristen and Eric if like I'm not somewhat serious about wanting to know about this? No. You're in downtown Boston on the seaport. There's a billion places I can go get a beer and not be bothered by somebody trying to sell me something. So, like, that's also like there's value there in that. Like, yes, I get something for coming out of my shell and coming to speak with you, but most people aren't putting themselves through like a business conversation if they're just like, yeah, I'm just here for 12 ounces of free beer.
Yeah, not in that scenario. Yes, the free beer was the free prize inside. They really were coming over to talk to us about their particular issues and seeing if we could help them. So yeah, I completely agree with you there. I want to talk a little bit about speaking at events because I also think this is an opportunity that people miss very frequently. So if you are an exhibitor, you're kind of like here, right? You
Mhm.
paid your way into that show, right? And everybody knows that just because you're an exhibitor doesn't mean there's any substance there, except that you had the money to come and sponsor and and exhibit, right? But a lot of these exhibiting packages come with the opportunity to speak. And a lot of sponsorships come with the opportunity to speak. And I don't think a lot of people take advantage of it. And I think they're really missing out because if you're speaking, if you're an authority, then that makes your participation at that show that much more interesting and that much more respected. You also have an opportunity to drive all those people you spoke to at your particular session back to your booth as well. So again, in terms of waiting for people to stumble upon you in aisle 5, row 6, like it's going to be better if you can tell your story to a large group of people, educate them, get them excited about your thought leadership and what you do, and be able to say to them, look, we have a booth here. If you want to talk to us more, come by. We're happy to spend as much time with you as you need to understand your particular issues and see if we can help you. Like now the authority is going to be accessible for some period of time. It just elevates your business and your participation to a whole another level. And I almost feel like it ought to be really mandatory. If you're going to have a booth, if you're going to be an exhibitor or sponsorship, you ought to ask back to make up your own package. You really ought to ask to be part of the content experience also.
I caught a break there because you probably don't remember this, but in January of 2020, you came to me and said, I want you to put in to speak at Inbound in whatever month it was being held that year. Come up with some ideas. And I was
Uh-huh.
sweating it for a bit of time there. And I was saved by a
You
little
weren't
virus,
selected.
but
Oh, the
no,
virus canceled.
it was canceled.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, and you must have forgot because you never. Well, we didn't. This is the first year that was back
Yeah, I mean, it was
hybrid
like
in
years
person,
since we did
and
anything with
and
them.
you had
Yeah.
forgotten. So I guess maybe next year. But I mean, you have a lot of experience in my doing the speaking. My first Inbound, I went to with the team. You and Eric were both speaking for Smash the Funnel, and what struck me. I mean, I remember going, and it was great going to the event. But I enjoyed, like, I was relatively new to the company at that point, and I enjoyed seeing, you and Eric in action. I was shocked by how, to your point, how responsive the audiences were. And it works on two fronts, right? Like you have that opportunity to speak to somebody and you can do this kind of passive sales pitch, right? Like you don't sell, you're not selling at all. But you're up there showing them, you're walking the walk and giving them a glimpse of what they would be buying into if they worked with you. And so the response out of that was I'd be back at the booth and we'd always know when the sessions ended because 200 people would just come up to the booth looking for, like, I think we were saying, like, hey, if you want a PDF copy, come by and we'll get you a PDF copy of
Hmm.
the book. And the
Yeah.
amount of people that came by and they would just like so eager to talk about what you guys had spoken about was amazing. So, I mean, I think that's just speaks volumes to exactly what you're saying. You have an opportunity to strut your stuff and show them exactly what you can do for them by, being a speaker. Get over the nervousness and do it.
Yeah. Also, if you think about it, if someone comes by the table or the booth, you have maybe 5-10 minutes to talk to them. It's very difficult to, you know, tell a compelling story in that short amount of time. And by the way, you're trying to get to know them a little bit and you're asking them questions about what their issues are. So, you might only have 30 seconds to do your elevator pitch before you start to really try to like engage with them in a productive way. When you're speaking, you might have a half an hour, you might have 45
Yeah.
minutes, you might have an hour to tell your story. It's so much better use of your time in those events to be able to tell 200 people your hour-long story, as opposed to everyone who comes by your 5-minute story in small 5-minute increments. So, and even when you do tell that story for 45 minutes or an hour and they come by the booth, they now have all kinds of context for what you already talked to them about. Hey, when you mentioned this, that really resonated with me. Can we talk about that more? Yeah, of course. Like it's so underutilized and probably one of the most powerful upgrades you could make to any kind of traditional conference or trade show participation, for sure.
There's there's so many things as we talk about in this session here, which is that, hey, think about modernizing what you're doing at shows and events, but that's the one thing where it's just like, no, 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 like that's been around forever and you should be tapping into that. That's not going away. And the people that are really, really good at it, and you know they leave those places like having spoken to a lot of people and generated a lot of meetings over the course of a few days just based on that
Yeah,
speech.
and actually, we just did a couple of shows last week and the week before where we used the QR code not in the booth but in the presentation. So after we were done our speaking event, we showed a QR code which took them to a landing page and got them to access to the slides immediately, and allowed them to schedule time with us when they get back to their office to continue the conversation. And it generated a couple of hundred opportunities for us, um, in and above whatever came out of the.
But isn't it like the simplest thing, and yet it's amazing because like when we go to these shows and you do see a speaker that you like and you're just like, oh man, am I going to get the slides? Check
Yeah,
your email. Like, is somebody going to send them? You're trying to contact the organizer. It's just like there's the QR code. Bang, you
yeah,
got
I'm
it.
always
It's
taking
such a
pictures.
small thing.
I'm
Exactly.
always
Yeah.
taking pictures of the slides, which I see people doing also. And I always say to them, I appreciate you taking pictures of my slides, but you don't have to. I'm going to give you all of them
Yeah.
at the end if you just kind of hang on. And then they put their phone down. And by the way, they're not listening when they're trying to size up the phone to get a good picture and take. So you want them to listen to you. You don't want them to be distracted with their phones. And then when they're done taking the picture, the phone buzzes. They're now looking at their messages and pretty soon they're on Facebook. So you really have to optimize your time there with them so that you can get them the content and continue that experience like we've been talking about. In the last couple of minutes here, I want to talk about some creative event strategies. And I want to talk about one specific one and get your feedback on it. So
Mm.
prior to Square Two, I worked for a software company, and my boss was the CEO was a genius, right? He maybe wasn't the easiest person to get along with, but he was brilliant. And his idea was to create his own show. So what he ended up doing was inviting customers and prospects to come to an event that never before around, like created it fresh,
Hmm.
and then went to partners and said, would you like access to this audience? And the partners paid sponsorship fees, and the people came, the prospects primarily paid to come to this event. And he did give away, customers could come for free, and I'm sure prospects who were good prospects got free tickets. But that entire event, and obviously that company had the center stage because they sponsored it. They like started it. They were the host sponsor. And what it turned into was 100% free marketing, because the sponsorships and the attendee fees covered all of the production costs, all of the hotel and food costs, all of the marketing costs for us to promote the event. And I guess it's kind of what HubSpot did with Inbound back in the day, was they kind of started their own conference. But I think that's a super interesting tactic for this kind of either free, or even you could make money on it. It could be marketing can become a profit center if you really ran it, correctly. And really interesting way to think about positioning your company as a thought leader, not being overly salesy in terms of what you're doing at the event, having customers sitting next to prospects and talking about your product and your company, and having other non-competitive partners there too to build out this rich content experience. I was always, as a newish marketer, like obviously that was many, many, many years ago that I had this job. I was always kind of in awe that they were able to kind of start this thing and run it in that way. And it took a lot of our time. Like I ran the marketing department. We did one big one a year. Then he wanted to do 2 a year. Then eventually he wanted to do them quarterly. Quarterly was such a big lift that we ended up going back to like twice a year, but they were so effective that you don't often think about starting your own conference or your own event as a marketing tactic.
I think, it touches on something we discussed on my last appearance, 2 episodes ago, which is the idea of community. Because I think when you start thinking that way about like, well, I'm gonna do my own thing, and it's got your fingerprints all over it, and it's bold and it's big, and it requires a huge investment of time and planning, and I'm sure money as well. Although it sounded like he kind of reverse engineered to get somebody else
Yeah.
to put the money up for it, so that's brilliant. But once you start doing that, like you are starting to now create this little bubble, this little community around yourself and your customers and vendors, whoever. And it's you would ask me on the last episode when I was here about when I went out to the Harvest Festival, and it's something similar. It's different in that like it's harvest and there's always parties around harvest in the farming community, but same idea. It's all brewers coming out who are, you think it's fun, but they're all customers. And at the end of the day, it's yes, let's celebrate harvest, but you're trying to get these brewers to buy more hops from you, and there's other vendors you're trying to do more things from, and they're all sitting together and talking about, oh, did you use this variety, that, oh, maybe I should be doing that. And it's community building and brand building. And so I think any opportunity you have to do something like that, it's probably invaluable. It's a lot of work, but it's probably invaluable.
Yeah, and we also talked about you have to have a stomach for this, because even if when I think back to like the first Inbound I went to, I think there was like 300 people there, right? And I think that was the second or third Inbound. It was in a hotel. Prior to COVID, it had 50,000 people. It was in a giant conference center. Even this time, it had 10,000 people in a somewhat giant conference center. So, if you're going to do this, you really have to have the stomach for it, and you have to look at it long term. First time you do it, you might get 30 people. That's not a failure, right? That's a successful event. It's a small, intimate event with people that probably got quite a bit out of it. The second time you're going to do it, go for 60 people, go for 100 people, go for 300 people, go for 600 people. Like, you have to be in almost all of these marketing tactics for the long haul. You can't do something once, like we talked about with the podcast. You can't do a month of podcasting and think you're going to be good to go and you're going to have 1,000 subscribers and everyone's going to be talking about you. You have to be in it for the long haul. The same thing with these events. If you're going to, and community building, which you're right, like it's kind of becoming a buzzword right now. Like, oh, I'm trying to build a community. I'm trying to like no one's trying to generate leads anymore. They're all trying to build a community, which is fine, but that's still going to be an investment in time and money over a long period, especially when you're talking about a community. Like it's going to take a while for the community to get roots. It's going to take a while for the community to spread. It's going to take a while for the community to really add a ton of value that continues to attract people back to it, however frequently the community is getting together. And these events are just another example of how you really have to be committed to it. Just think if HubSpot had stopped Inbound because it only had 300 people the year that I went to it. Like they never would have had what Inbound ended up turning into. And I'm sure, Crosby probably would have had the same thing. If their first Hops Fest only had 20 people, and they're like, oh, that sucked. Like, I don't know if we should do that again. They never would have had what you experienced when you went out there a couple months ago. So, you know, marketing, good brand building is not something that is achieved quickly. It's something that is really invested in and nurtured over time. And you have to have that time horizon and perspective around it if you're ever going to have any kind of success.
Do you remember do you remember the client we had that did Schnizzfest?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, it just made me think of it. It was another example.
Yeah, no,
And I think that
it
was
is
a
a
very
good
small
example.
thing. Yeah.
Yes, they were an MSP. Actually, they provided coaching and content for managed service providers. You know, these smallish companies that handle your IT, your laptops, and your network. And there are a lot of them are small businesses, and this company, True Methods, which ended up getting acquired, provided a lot of educational material and some software and coaching and things that helped MSPs be more successful. And they had their own conference called Schnizzfest. I don't remember exactly why it was called Schnizzfest,
I don't
but
remember either.
it also grew, and they were very committed to that too. It started small in New Jersey, and it ended up being a fairly large, with I think 600 to 800 people in Orlando at a pretty big hotel down there. So, yeah, exactly the same kind of experience, same kind of idea, and you got to be in. You got to be in it for the long term, for sure.
Right. And not a big company, not an inbound. That's why I brought it
No,
up. Like,
yes,
not a
yes.
HubSpot. Yeah. Yeah.
No, good point. They were a small company. They're a family company. I think they had like 25 people that worked there, but this was important to them and important to their community, important to their customers, and it worked out really well for them. I'm sure they
Yeah.
probably broke even or made a little money on that too. Same kind of thing. Bob, again, you killed it. I really appreciate you stepping in. You're welcome back at What's Wrong with Revenue anytime. So if you ever want to come on the show, just shoot me an email and I'll get you on, I promise. Let me do a little housekeeping, then we'll wrap up. Just to remind everybody, if you want to get today's show, go check it out on our YouTube channel, square2marketing.com. You can like us, you can subscribe to the show, you can leave comments. We really appreciate what everyone does on YouTube. If you're interested in any kind of audio and video content, including this, head on over to Square 2 Plus, our Netflix style free streaming service, www.square2marketing.com/square2plus. You can actually subscribe to Square 2 Plus, and every time we post something new, which is roughly once a week or so, we will let you know, and you can go check it out. Just like Netflix lets you know when new shows come out. If you love the show and you want to subscribe to the show specifically, there's a link at the bottom of our website, What's Wrong with Revenue. Click it. You can ask questions like a couple of the ones we handled today. You can subscribe to the show. We will email you the show every Thursday after we take care of the editing and publication of the show. And we'll also email you upcoming shows. So you'll get an email with what we're going to talk about, and you can join us live at 4 o'clock every day, every week, Wednesday at 4 o'clock. If you want to participate live, we'd really appreciate it. Bob, thanks again. I really appreciate you stepping in. You're always a wealth of knowledge. You have an interesting perspective on the kinds of things that we're talking about. And again, super appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Bob, have a good rest of your day. We'll see you all soon.
Take care.